talking about how charities can work effectively with funeral directors. The session will be recorded and we will be making a copy available on our support site within the next couple of days. So if you want to share, if you're a partner and you want to share it with colleagues, then you'll be able to. You've already worked out that stuff goes in the chat box. So if you want to communicate with us or other people that are attending the session, then put your comments in the chat box. So thank you very much for that. So before we make a start, I just wanted to launch a poll. So we're going to ask you what interactions you've had with funeral directors. So hopefully this works. So is that showing up on people's screens?
Yes, definitely.
Excellent. So brilliant. So have you received offline donations? I'm guessing lots of people probably have. Have you hosted a funeral director event? Have funeral directors fundraised for you, it should say, and or have you been to a funeral? Or perhaps there's something else, or perhaps there's something that you really like to share with us in the chat box about how you have maybe worked with a funeral director. So okay, so this is my lack of knowledge. I think I have to do it too. So I'm going to put that one. Let's see if so now, are we now seeing the responses on everybody's screens?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, perfect. So actually, there's a lot of people here who maybe haven't received offline donations for funeral directors. A few people have hosted a funeral director events. They've had funeral directors fundraising for them, but only 16%. And I'm glad to see that not many people have been to a funeral. That's always good to hear, to be honest. And yeah, if you want to share your experiences about other stuff in the chat, then that would be fantastic. So thanks very much for doing that for us. So for those of you that don't know us, I'm here today with my colleague Jane. Jane is an account manager at Much Loved and has been working with us for several years now. And I'm Sally and I'm head of partnerships. So look after, together with the help of Jane and some other colleagues, we look after all of our charity and funeral director partners. So just to sort of set the scene, and also because I wanted to remove some misconceptions, I thought it would be useful to cover types of funerals there are. So burials make up about 25% of all funerals these days, the figure which seems to be on the decline, despite there being so many different options. So from traditional burials, so burial in a cemetery or a churchyard, to more kind of green options such as natural or green burials or woodland burials. They're increasingly popular for environmental reasons. They need to be in a designated natural burial ground and often used biodegradable coffins and have minimal or no permanent grave markers. Or perhaps, you know, there are also lots of different religious burials. They have their own requirements and specific rites. You've also got burials at sea. They're relatively uncommon, but they are permitted, but have specific licensed areas in the UK and require a marine license, and coffins must meet strict environmental standards. And you can be buried on privately owned land, but that requires compliance with local authority, environmental health and planning regulations. And it's rare and very tightly regulated, or people can also be buried in a vault or a mausoleum, and that's pretty unusual in the UK. So 75% of deaths and people are cremated, so that's the majority of people. So a standard cremation is where there would be a small service at a crematorium with family and friends present. The second option is a direct, or could be called an unattended funeral, and that is exactly what it is. There's no service. So the body is taken to the crematorium without family or friends. There's no service. They drop it off, it's cremated, and then the ashes are picked up later and given back to family. And there are big national companies like Pure Cremations who offer this type of service. And then you've got a water cremation, which is the newest form available in England. Licensing for Scotland has just been passed, I think. And that's a gentle kind of eco-friendly alternative to the traditional fire cremation. Uses water and an alkaline solution to break down the body, resulting in a sterile liquid and bone fragments. I bet you didn't think you were going to learn today. So in terms of the different types of funeral directors, no one knows exactly how many funeral directors there are in the UK. It's around 5,000 or 6,000 branches. But importantly, it's important to look at how they kind of are made up. So range from independents, and that could be made up of 1 or 2 branches, or it could be a large group. So there's a real variety within that kind of section. So many independents are family owned, have been in the family for generations, and consider themselves a very big part of the community. You then got corporate groups, so companies like Dignity, they've got about 800 branches across the UK. And then you've got companies like Funeral Partners, they have about 300 branches in the UK. And then there are smaller kind of acquisitional companies, funeral director companies that are emerging in the UK that are buying up some of the smaller independents. And in that case, they tend to keep the smaller independent name across the door, but sort of change the branding colours into whatever the colours are of the company that has purchased them. And then you've got the co-ops, and I thought it was really worth distinguishing how they are made up, because you would be very much forgiven for thinking that they're all the same company. So the square logo here is the national co-op, and they are called Co-op Funeral Care, and they have about 800 branches spread across the UK. And then you've got lots of smaller regional cooperatives. So this one here with the square is Southern Cooperative. You've got Central, Heart of England, sorry, East of England, Heart of England, Scott Mid Funerals, and Lincolnshire. And then there are a couple of other much smaller regional cooperatives as well. So very similar branding. Some of them use the same suppliers, but they are different companies. So in my local high street, for example, I have got a national co-op food shop, but I've also got a Southern co-op food shop. And if I ask my friends, they kind of think they're the same company, and that is what happens. So I thought it would be useful to distinguish between those. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you've got direct cremations. So that's plans and disposal services. And that's companies like Pure Cremation, but also companies like Aurora, Simplicity, and some of the other Variety Funerals. So there's a lot of sort of direct cremation services. But don't forget all the others, independents, corporates, and cooperatives also offer the option for people to have direct cremation or unattended funeral. So most funeral directors in the UK are affiliated to an industry organisation, but there's no obligation for them to do so. It's worth mentioning that up until recently, it was an unregulated service, meaning that anyone could set themselves up as a funeral director. Now that's changing. The industry began its journey into regulation in September 21, set out by the Competition and Markets Authority, and meaning they now have to display a price list, declare its financial interest, including any charitable donations over £250. Worth bearing in mind, if you are looking for sponsorship, they also have to show their terms of business and ownership. So it's much more transparent, and they also have to give their payment terms. Now, all these trade bodies provide support, advocacy, and education. And the NAFD is the oldest, founded in 1905 as the British Undertakers Association, and it's evolved into the largest, most inclusive representative body for the UK funeral profession. It's one of a number of organisations that has appeared over the last 300 years to represent those responsible for managing the disposal of the dead. And it represents independents and large groups. They run the NFE, which is the National Funeral Exhibition, which is a biannual event, and it happens to be running in June this year from the 11th to the 13th, and that's a Thursday, Friday and Saturday. It's free to attend, so if you are interested in learning more about the sector, then go along if it's easy to get to. It's in Coventry in a place called Stoneleigh Park. Charities have exhibited there before. I've been, I think, probably showing how my age, but I think I've done the last 9. So I have seen Charities exhibiting there. I don't know what benefit they've got from that. So actually, if there are any charities here today and they have exhibited before, then maybe perhaps you can share what your experience was, or perhaps you've attended as an individual and you might like to share your experience as well on the chat. So please feel free to pop those in the chat. There's also the National Society of Allied and Independent Funeral Directors, or SAFE. They established in 1989 to support independent, mostly family-owned funeral directors. That was created to address the concerns about the proliferation of the larger conglomerated companies in the funeral industry, and they have about 1,000 members. And then there's also the British Institute of Funeral Directors that was established in 1982 by some members of the NEFD, and their mission is to be the preeminent provider of education for UK funeral profession. So all of the 3 services actually do provide educational services. They all have a kind of diploma facility and funeral arrangers can get qualifications through. They all have an elected committee with an annual president whose role involves a blend of ambassadorial duties, governance oversight, and ensuring strategic continuity. They tend to be the primary public face of the organisation for a year, hosting regional and national meetings and ending their presidential year at the organisation's AGM with banquet. Most presidents will select a charity to support for the year, and they all have magazines as well, and you may well have advertised in some of them. So the NEFD has a magazine called FDM, so many acronyms this morning. SAFE has SAFE Insight, and the BIFD has a journal. Now, they're always looking for good content, and when we scroll through them, we often see pictures of charities being presented with cheques. So it gives you the idea that perhaps maybe there was an opportunity to expand upon that picture and actually share from the charity's perspective how they've benefited from that income or how they've worked with that particular funeral director in their local community. And then something that I haven't put on the slide but might be worth mentioning is that there's Funeral Service Times, and that's a more independent publication. And they run a charity promotional campaign. They talk about it as a high impact promotional package designed to put your organisation directly in the front of the funeral profession. I don't know how much worth that would be, but I felt like I ought to tell you, just so that you can look into it and make that choice for yourselves. So starting to look at the opportunities that are available for you to work with funeral directors, these are a few that sprang to mind. I won't read through them. It ranges from independents, many of who will pride themselves in the work they do in the community, hosting walks or getting involved through transporting people that need it at Christmas. They'll be keen to have a close relationship with their local organisations, and they're often looking for window displays. So if you're running a local campaign or an annual campaign or a fundraising campaign or something that you would like to help to get promotion with, and you've got some collateral, then why not approach your local funeral directors to ask them if they would support you in that way. And they're also likely to be keen on volunteering and other types of fundraising. So there are a couple of funeral directors that I know of that have dedicated charity community champions, so supporting their communities with kind of community knit and natter classes or craft sessions or lunch clubs or walking. So they're very much community focused. And then some of the larger corporate groups, it might well be worth approaching them about Charity of the Year or sponsorship in a bigger way. And don't forget that their branches will be keen to have support as well. And don't forget that £250 that could be available. I also wanted to mention the Institute of Cemetery and Crematorium Management, the ICCM. They run a recycling metals scheme. So that's metals that have been in people's bodies, and they run it in partnership with Ortho Metals, and they are recycled. And I think in 2024, that was worth about 23 million that had been raised through the scheme. So definitely worth getting in touch with your local crematorium and speaking to them about that, how you may benefit. So I'd like to share with you here some lovely examples of how the funeral sector are supporting their local community. There's a really lovely example here of how AW Lim, based in Nottingham, support Nottingham's hospitals, and so proud of the fact that they've put that on their website. Which reminds me that if you are intrigued to learn even more about the funeral sector, then I'd recommend watching Stacey Dooley's Inside the Undertakers. It's on iPlayer. I think it ran a couple of years ago. Really interesting. She goes to AW Lim and they very kindly get her, allow her to be there for a week or so, and she speaks to all sorts of different people within the company. So pallbearers, mortuary assistants, the florists, everyone. So definitely worth a watch if you'd like to learn a little bit more. There's also some other lovely examples of people taking part in sleep outs. This is the middle one here is Amanda Pink, who was the BIFD president, taking part in a skydive to raise money for the Lullaby Trust, her chosen charity for her residential year. Kent and Sussex Crematorium donated some money to a bereavement charity. And then you've got this fantastic organisation, W. Uden. They're based in South London and Kent, and every year they make a Christmas video and record a song, and it's all to help support Demelza House Hospice, so their local hospice. So pretty incredible organisation. And then I found this post, which was really nice. It was on LinkedIn from Lodge Brothers. They are based in the kind of Surrey area. They are supporting Thames Hospice Trunks Across Thames, their Elephant Art Trail, which is in Windsor and Slough. And this year they were delighted to be invited in to shortlist the artwork for their elephant. So they're very proud of their connections with the local communities. And then here's a few more examples. So CPJ Field, which they've got about 50 odd branches in the kind of sort of southern home counties. And then they put on here all their little squares of different activities that their branches have taken place for local charities and initiatives. Sunderland Mind got one of their funeral directors involved in their Boxing Day dip, which was sponsored. And Teesside Co-op, and you can see it's the main co-op because it's the Square Co-op logo, involved in putting their sports gear on and stepping out for their local organisations. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour, but I'm going to hand over to Jane, who's going to talk to you a little bit about more how we work directly with funeral directors and the service that we provide them.
Morning, everyone. Nice to see so many of you here. Digital memorials are now a core part of how families remember, grieve, connect, and fundraise. In the UK today, 1 in 4 deaths have an online tribute, and a further 2 in 4 share the funeral information and fundraise online in another digital way, showing that there's a huge shift in the way that people remember their loved ones and fundraise in memory. Whilst we can only give you the stats from a much loved perspective, the figure is continuing to grow. We've seen a definite increase in tribute pages being set up. In fact, on an average weekday, there are 500 pages created. These stats on the slide show that bereavement is widely shared online, either by a much loved page or via some other form of tribute. In the past, funeral information was placed in the local paper or perhaps on a board in the funeral director's branch, But sadly, local papers are few and far between these days, and even they, for the most part, have moved online. Social media enables people to share their memorial far and wide. It allows for collective grieving no matter where you are in the world. As well as a place for memories, tributes also help families and friends as a long-term bereavement tool. It's always accessible to anyone at any time, no matter where they are, as you can access it via your phone, which is always in everyone's pocket. So whilst digital memorials are now the norm, so too are donations at funerals as opposed to flowers. In the past, flowers were sent, but this is no longer the case. And with most funerals these days, people are specifically requested not to send flowers and to make a charitable donation instead. And to be transparent, I'd wanted to remind you that there are multiple ways of collecting online. There's memory giving, funeral notices who use Donatus, funeral guide, GoFundMe, Just Giving. Some funeral directors even have their own in-house services. But I do feel that I'm quite justified in reminding you that none of these offer the bereavement support that Much Loved does. We often get asked if funeral directors recommend a charity to their families. I would say that most families organising a funeral will have a very good idea of which charity they want to support, and so don't expect a funeral director to recommend your charity. I'm sure if the family are unsure, they will discuss it with family members and friends rather than a funeral director. Something to bear in mind is, as Sally mentioned, 75% of funerals are a cremation rather than a burial. And within that percentage, within that, a growing proportion of those are going to be unattended cremations, which means there's no opportunity for a collection of funeral donations unless there is an online memorial page, or perhaps if they have a celebration of life or something like that. After the cremation. Offline options are also available, but they do bring with them various challenges. Crematorium slots are booked in 30-minute windows. The family can choose to book a double slot of 60 minutes, but of course that's going to cost them more money. So within that standard 30-minute booking time, the funeral director has to get all the mourners into the venue, conduct a meaningful service, perhaps also allowing time for family members to speak, and then move all the mourners out of the venue while still allowing them time to gather themselves after what is a very emotional time. They need to do this without causing any delays for the next service, and unfortunately, if the funeral director does overrun, they can face a fine from the crematorium, and also it will upset the people who are attending the next service. The priority of the funeral director is the family and the mourner, and that's something we do need to remember. So whilst you can ask them to share collection envelopes, again, that does have its own issues. Generally, people donate less than when a considered donation is made. Generally, when a donation is made by card, the amount is higher. Gift aid can't be collected. People might not have a pen. There's all those kinds of things to bear in mind. You can give the funeral directors collection boxes, but you know that again has its own issues. Somebody needs to be responsible for it. Who's going to take it from the crematorium to the wake? And again, it just causes more responsibility for the funeral director. Just to remind you, funeral donations can be made through Much Loved pages, which can be set up either by funeral directors directly through Much Loved or through your own service. When the funeral directors set up the pages, they do put on the back of them the QR code, which makes it super easy for people to make their donation. They simply point their phone at the back of the order of service and it takes them directly to the tribute. So how do we work with funeral directors? Much Loved works with both funeral directors and charities. Funeral directors have a partner area which is very similar to your partner area, which is where they log in and create the pages for their families. The pages are quick and easy for them to set up. They take literally 2 minutes, and all the information for the funeral can be added. So they can add the time, the location, parking instructions, if the family want people to wear a specific color, live streaming details. They can also add the committal and the reception details if applicable. So every element of the day, including the funeral donations, can be found on a Much Loved page, which the family can then easily share via WhatsApp or a text, etc., etc. For the funeral directors, each page also shows their logo. You can see it right down the bottom of the page if you scroll down. So it offers them a little bit of soft advertising. Also, the pages they create sit on the funeral director websites of our funeral director partners. So that means that people will come to their website, perhaps to look for the funeral information or to make a donation, and it will increase the CEO ranking for the funeral director and increase their visibility in the local community, for example. Finally, and probably most importantly, using a Much Loved page means that funeral directors do not have to deal with cash and checks. So it takes all of that administration, all that security issue out of their working lives, and it makes things so much easier for them. From your charity point of view, the benefits of the funeral directors creating the page. Well, for Much Loved partners, if you've got your alerts in place, you'll be notified as soon as a page is created, which gives your charity an immediate opportunity to offer your condolences, light that candle, and send a thank you to the next of kin. And we've seen that partners doing that have had a huge success, and it really does make an impact on the donations and the amount that the pages collect. Much Loved also reclaims the gift aid on your behalf, which means that you will receive more money than if the donations were made by cash or check. In your Much Loved partner area, you as a charity can immediately see the donation that has been made by clicking on your donations tab. Alternatively, you can run a donor detail report, which also gives your GDPR responses. But do bear in mind that those reports only go up until midnight the night before. As donations are made online, for our Much Loved partners, all the donors will be presented with your GDPR ask. So this means that if the donor decides to opt in, you are able to go on and perhaps build a relationship with a supporter who might not have even known or heard of your charity previously. And just to remind you, the family are able to easily archive all the funeral information after the event. So all they do is they archive it and it's moved up to the galleries. It just means that then when they come back to the page, perhaps to look at the photos or read the messages again, they don't need to see that, but they can still continue to visit the page using it as a bereavement tool and perhaps also continuing to make further donations to your charity. So now I am handing you back to Sally.
Sorry. Well, there's just one more slide on that that we wanted to
apologies.
show you. Okay, I'll do it. So this is just a map of all of the funeral directors that we work with in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. So just to give you a flavour of kind of where our funeral director partners are sort of distributed. I think it's around about 2,500 branches that work with this. So funeral directors really do want to help, and they can be a little bit of a tricky bunch, but don't give up, because remember, they are individuals as well as companies. They work with people at a very vulnerable time of their lives. They are very caring people and often part of the community. So remember that branches and companies will have small charity funds that they can access to support their communities. They will often do seasonal fundraising, and towards the end of last year, we saw many of our funeral director partners use their dedication pages, because they have access to that as well as our charity partners, to help their communities remember. And some of them selected to support a charity during that time. So you actually might be able to influence that a little bit. Remember, raising funds as governing bodies. Don't forget Amanda's example of supporting the Lullaby Trust. And also the NEFD and SAFE also have regional networks that you may be able to tap into. So some of them are part of community groups and will get involved in fundraising through those. Others will be willing to take part in volunteering roles, and that will help to keep your cause front and centre. And don't forget, crematoria staff are important too. And I'm really grateful for lots of the comments that are coming through about charities that have received donations through the recycling scheme. So thank you everybody for your sharing your experiences of that. So have a think about what you can offer as well as maybe what you can receive. And here are a few ideas to consider. Whilst you're having a look at those, we've seen some examples where air ambulances have provided space and first aid training through an NAFD regional meeting. We've had hospices hosting funeral director events, providing a space for training on how to use tributes, but also that opens up the conversation for them to support the organisation in other ways as well. So I'll let you have a look at that, and then I'm just going to hand over to Jane to sum up, and then we'll have a look at some of the questions that have come through.
Okay, so as always, we like to give you a few tangible takeaways from our webinars. First and foremost, I would say thank you. For our much loved partners, with your alerts in place, you'll know as soon as a page is created by one of our funeral director partners. So you can immediately light that candle, add a message of condolence, and thank the family. You could also think about thanking the funeral directors. I don't know that you need to thank them for every page they set up, and it depends on your capacity. But what you can do is perhaps at the end of the year, send them a Christmas card, and in that card you could make use of your reports to find out how much that funeral director has raised for your charity throughout the year. You could send them a card with that amount, perhaps also sharing the impact that the money has had on your charity and what it's enabled you to do. So to do that, you just use your funds by referrer report. And also, if you can't work out how to do it, just get in touch with your account manager. We're happy to help. Don't shy away too from explaining to the funeral directors just how helpful it is when they create the much loved pages, the ease with which you can access all the information you need, etc., etc. So it is worth reminding them how easy it makes your lives. So point 2, if possible, ask them along. Obviously, this might not be possible for all charities, but for those of you that have got your own building or perhaps have an annual event, you can invite them along, give them a tour, show them just what impact their funeral donations are having. And to take that further, what can you offer them? Funeral directors definitely want to help. And as Sally said, they are the loveliest people. They really care about the families that they look after, and they want to make sure that everything is fine. And they also want to help you charities. So if you're a charity, can you invite them along? Can you offer them a tour? If you're a wildlife charity, can you offer them a walk? Can you host one of their local FD association meetings? If you're a sports charity, can you invite them and give them a tour of your stadium? Would they be interested in sponsoring an event? There's so many ways that you can get in touch with them. And one final reminder is that if you are a Much Loved Partner charity, I know we are trying to work with all the funeral directors in the country, but we don't work with everyone. But if you are a partner charity, you do have your Funeral Create links that you can offer your supporters. So the Optimum partners will have the Funeral Create widget, and our Advantage partners will have a link that will create a page which will contain all the funeral details. So, you know, they can use those to create their own funeral notices. And finally, oh, getting lots of comments in. The last thing I wanted to share with you is a lovely handwritten note that was sent from Vicky at Devon Air Ambulance to all at AG Down funeral directors. It's only a simple short note, but it's handwritten, which is really lovely. And I just wanted to highlight her final sentence where she says, "Together we are Devon Air Ambulance." So again, she's reinforcing the fact that the charity and the funeral directors are working together to help raise funds so the air ambulance can continue to do their very important work. And now I can hear lots of pings, so I'm assuming there's lots of comments, which I hope Sally's been having a look at.
Yeah, so just kind of going back to the little bit further up, somebody asked about the magazines. So just to let you know that the NAFD have the FBM magazine, SAFE magazine is called SAFE Insight, and BIFD is BIFD Journal. I'll try and put them in the chat actually for you guys. Somebody asked about sharing sort of a document on some information we've written. So actually what we will do is kind of turn this into a bit of a blog. So our colleagues will create a bit more of an article around the webinar that we've done. So look out for that because it will be on one of our newsletters. If you're not subscribed, then give me a shout or just email support@muchloved and we will add you. So there's lots of shared experience about receiving income from recycling metal schemes. So thank you very much for doing that. And there's also been quite a lot of chat about assigning a tribute guardian. Not just your bugbear, it's ours too. And we very much try to influence the funeral director to hand the page over to the family, because more than anything, we think it's really important that the family understands that that page is there, and also if they don't have ownership of it or access to it, then they can't add content to it and use it as an ongoing bereavement service. So we are trying to change that narrative. If you have any influence with your local funeral directors, or if you want us to provide them a bit more training to try and change that, then let us know. We're really open to working further with them to try and change their position. It can be a little bit tricky, I have to say, for some of them, but yeah, anything we can do, maybe we can work together on that. There have been a couple of inquiries about providing more information. I've made a note of those, so I'll make sure that one of our account managers gets in touch directly with you, and we'll provide you some more information via email and set up a little talk.
Sorry, Sally, I was just reading that one of our, Mark mentioned that they have a woodland where he said, we thought about reaching out to the FDs about promoting, and this is a fab idea, which is great because it would be so lovely. The funeral directors can come and have a lovely walk. You can build up that relationship. It's a really nice idea.
Yeah, exactly. There's been a little bit further on, going back to the next of kin bit about sending a letter to the funeral director. It sounds like from your experiences, they're not overly keen on forwarding that letter on. So another reason why, if they just put the next of kin details in fact, they don't even have to make the next of kin the owner, they can just put the next of kin details in. And then as a partner, you can access that information through your reporting. I haven't been keeping track. Jane, is there anything else that's come through?
Well, somebody did mention that they present some of their funeral directors with a small award at the. We present our FDs an award each year for the top 3, which is a really nice idea because, you know, it's nice to show the funeral directors that they're appreciated, and the fact that they help to raise funds for your charity is appreciated. So that's a lovely idea. Is there a cost for a funeral director to set up a page for a family? No, there's not. We have funeral director partners. They pay for the service, but there's no cost for the pages at all. There's no cost for the funeral director or for the families, and the pages are there for the family as long as they wish.
Lots of people sharing their email addresses to. Is that to find out a little bit more about what Mark's done? Maybe you'd like to join us on a webinar and share your story more widely. Well, we'll speak to you about that directly. But yeah, any other questions coming through? We've probably got time for one more before we get back to your day jobs.
Yeah, and what we will do is we'll go through all the questions and anything applicable, because so many people have put their emails in. We can always get back to you on anything that we haven't answered now.
So we are actively recruiting more funeral director partners. Somebody's put a question about that. Yeah, we are always on the lookout for new funeral director partners. So actually, if there are any that you know of in your local area that aren't working with us, again, just let us know. We are happy to try and approach them. Often, I have actually seen with great success hospice recommending us to a funeral director, and they sign with us, and yeah, over. I think they're actually responsible for over 500 funerals a year, and they use the service very actively. So a recommendation from a charity to a funeral director can work really nicely. We don't have a published list of all the funeral directors that we're working with, actually, Nikki. But if you get in touch, we can let you know, or you can let us know who's in your local area, and we can let you know if we're working with them. Great. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for attending our session this morning.